Hello, everybody. Welcome to Film Family. And today we're just going to be talking about some news. So, if you are a film fan or you follow, just news on movies, you've probably heard about that Bob Iger, who is the CEO for Disney, has been for the past 15 years. He dropped a book, and there was some parts of this book concerning his, dealings with Star Wars and the franchise when Disney bought it in 2012. And talking about how George Lucas, who created Star Wars, felt betrayed by kind of everything that transpired with the making of the Disney Star Wars movies. And today we just kind of wanted to discuss that a little bit, just in kind of the ways that we thought of that situation.
Love it. Yeah. So what was your initial reaction when you heard the news?
Yeah, so I wasn't really sure what they meant yet, obviously, because there's we don't have the pages or passages in front of us, but you can look them up. It's funny because it's a whole book. That's kind of the only thing anybody's talking about. The CEO of Disney drops his book, but it's talking about how he kind of had plans for a sequel trilogy. He never really executed them because he did because if you don't know, actually, George Lucas wanted to make the prequels kind of since the 70s, but he just said that technology wasn't ready yet. Obviously, he put them out in the end of the 90s and 2000s and mixed acclaim, mixed responses. And, then he kind of had his scripts and plans for the sequel trilogy. And Disney said that they were going to have it. They were going to look over it to get some creative input. And they just kind of threw it out. And Kathleen Kennedy, who's the president of Lucasfilm, kind of said they had this interview in 2013, I believe, where she was like, well, it's important we have to respect these characters from George, and that's the main focus. And
with him there, sitting right next to her.
Right, literally in the
she's
other chair.
We have to
basically this distance.
Yeah, distance, talking about respecting the legacy and the characters.
And saying that, kind of talking about how that's going to be a big focus going forward, because she's talking about how there's going to be a whole new stage and storytelling for Lucasfilm and Star Wars, and blah blah blah, and kind of now we're here in 2019, 3 months away from arguably what should be the biggest movie of the year, and kind of people hate Star Wars now, and it's kind of become this very cynical thing. It's going to become all these internet debates, and it's a little sad to see that kind of us be in that place.
It's very sad for me because Star Wars is one of those things and one of those movies that made me want to be a director, and just made me believe in the movie part of
the magic.
There's certain movies in the that genre and that era that I fell in love with. And I have honestly, maybe I will once I see more trailers. Not excited for this.
Literally, movie. I couldn't care less. There's dramas coming out this year that I care more about than seeing Star Wars, and that just shouldn't happen. No matter what type of movie you have, it should not trump the excitement that Star Wars has. And like you were saying, me too, personally, Star Wars, some of the first movies I watched them growing up, literally, tens of maybe hundreds of times. I'm probably about 90 watches for each of them right now, maybe 80. And I just love those movies so much, all 6 of them, even the prequels. I've grown with those movies and kind of formed my own opinions. And Star Wars really is, to me, in a class of its own, and not just in movies but in modern storytelling, because it feels like kind of classical storytelling from hundreds and thousands of years ago, but mythical. For a modern era. And we clearly care about Star Wars because there's literally everywhere you look you can find a product that has a Star Wars brand on it. There's cups with Star Wars. Just people know the names of Star Wars. People know the quotes from Star Wars, the music, and it's become less of this kind of cultural icon and become sort of this kind of divider of people when it really should bring people together. It's a movie after all. And it's supposed to, movies are supposed to unite people, not just fiercely divide them. And
yeah. I mean, to me, I feel like Star Wars is like a spouse that cheated on you, and it's and you can accept them back, but it's not going to ever be the same. There's trust issues now.
Yeah,
and honestly, I don't trust them anymore.
Yeah, I think another, if we're talking about relationship terms, is, and people say this about a lot of movie franchises, is an abusive relationship where you just keep going back to them. It's not a healthy relationship. There should not be abusive relationships, and Star Wars is kind of one. I was here, I'll just go see a new movie. But it's funny because that relationship seems to be dissolving a little bit because Solo's box office returns were not interesting because people told them nobody wants to see a Han Solo movie. The movie came out, clearly nobody wanted to see it. It made less money than Ant-Man. I shouldn't even have to say that. Yeah. And, Star Wars become, kind of this pariah in a lot of places, and then in certain other places it's become this thing that people have to kind of wear on their shoulders and be like, I'm just going to defend this movie till I die, even the new ones, and they just, it really becomes this unhealthy thing to talk about, and like kind of like I said, just divides people more than it unites them, which should be the last thing it does.
I mean, I'm a realist, and the thing is that I love Star Wars. Like, I loved Star Wars, and I was probably one of those people that were like bleeding Star Wars out of my ears. But when I saw a bad movie, I see a bad movie. In terms of, I can't defend it. It's like and we've talked about our experience of seeing, The Last Jedi, was it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we haven't gone too in detail, but people know. I mean, so many people don't like The Last Jedi.
I haven't even seen it since, so that's why
I haven't either. And I've seen, like I said, I've seen the original 6 Star Wars movies, each about like 80 to 90 times. I've seen The Force Awakens like 3 times. I've seen Rogue One like twice. I've seen Solo once. We'll never watch it again. I'll have to watch The Last Jedi before the new movie comes out, and I don't want to. And it really just, like I said, there's a lot of cynicism that's kind of, found its way to be combined with Star Wars. And one of the things that sort of like makes me sad is that, like what you're saying about a bad movie, like as I've grown up, I can, more and more each time I rewatch, see why people don't like the prequels. Like, I'm not sitting here saying they're perfect movies, but I can still ignore a lot of their dialogue flaws and whatnot, because I just love the story and I love the idea of Star Wars, and there's so much to like, the lightsaber fights, the music, but that's not what we're talking about. But the new movies just don't feel like that. They don't
There's
feel
no
like
vision
Star Wars.
behind it. Yeah.
There's no vision behind it, and I know there's a lot of people on the internet who have said this, so this isn't my original thought, but like they said, like it feels like they had a script, had a thing, and then they kind of had a second one, and then they try to combine them, and then it ended up just being like this sort of monster that they created, and then they have to kind of sweep it up, do damage control, and it's really just kind of made this whole like watching of the new Star Wars movies kind of unpleasant for people.
I know your answer already, but I don't think they know that. In terms of like, how do you feel about their tossing Lucas's ideas for, for these movies? Like,
I mean, okay, so I've always been the firm believer. I just want to say this, like I'm a huge George Lucas fan. He was like one of my favorite people of anything ever, and he is literally like a guy who's shaped my childhood. Like like you said, he made me want to become a director. Like he's literally made me like want to make movies, because I just want to like have that same effect, and that sort of thing is very powerful, because there's not many people who can do that. And George Lucas may not be the best dialogue writer. He's literally admitted himself a couple of times, and like for me, I can respect that, because I think he's a great storyteller and has a great vision. I just think I really do think that if a couple small changes were made to the prequels, they would have ended up being like masterpieces, and this allotted trilogy, kind of like the original Star Wars, trilogy was. But there's a lot of hate on George Lucas these days.
Yeah.
And not just that, like as I've been covering this situation, or not covering it, kind of reading about it, watching YouTube videos, I still see people saying, who cares? George Lucas's ideas were terrible anyway. He, he made the prequels terrible. He clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. And then I've heard some people had the audacity to say that the original trilogy actually would have been bad if he had more control, and they're only good because other people were involved with it. And I genuinely think that's one of the most disrespectful things I've heard in terms of a movie, because I really don't think people just realize that he wrote like the script for the first one by himself, worked on the scripts for the other one, and the story, like had pretty much everything was from his head in terms of like the ideas of the movie, and just created this incredible like story, and still works on it today. He was a big part of the Clone Wars, and people still just kind of hate on him for it, and it very much angers me.
Well, of course. I mean, he was the master of that universe. Like, he created all those characters and everything like that. That takes a genius to do.
Seriously,
especially so intriguing of characters that you wanted every action figure, or people knew they were distinct and different.
I mean, just look at the numbers that Star Wars brought during like its heyday, and before the prequels even came out, like how much money they just made for how many tickets they sold. Like I believe, I could be wrong, but A New Hope like is the highest like number of tickets ever sold for a movie. They kept A New Hope in for like more months than it should have, because people were like complaining about it leaving. Like, Star Wars means a lot to people, and this guy created it, and people are still tearing his name down and dragging it through the mud. It's so disrespectful to me. Now, I do agree, not every piece of dialogue he wrote in the prequels is fantastic, but I think the prequels have an excellent story, and I think I can clearly see George's vision. I just don't know if it's executed perfectly, but the sequels, absolutely not. They set up all these things to happen, And The Last Jedi seems like it tore down. Some people still call Last Jedi brilliant because of how subversive it is. And that's not what movies have to be. There are subversive movies that work, but when you're subverting for the sake of subversion and you're just trying to, kind of do this thing that people have called The Last Jedi bad fan fiction, like that's how much that movie is hated. And that should tell you something. The fact that they're bringing the Emperor back simply because people like him, when it doesn't seem like it's going to even logically make sense in the story, it just shows me that they have almost no hindsight or foresight for this franchise that they were trying to start up, and they almost have no clear direction in which they want the story to go. And now they're bringing like Kevin Feige and doing all these things to be like, oh, here, are you happy with this now? And I hope, again, like the future of Star Wars is good. I don't want to just hope it's ruined because Disney has it, but from what they've shown me so far, they have almost no clear, creative vision to it, and that just really kind of bums me out because I think Star Wars should have a vision behind it.
I think Star Wars is going to be fine later, only because the more it is not about, the Skywalker Saga, the more leeway they have in terms of screwing up. And not screwing up, but in terms of not caring about what the fans think.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, because the fans hold it closer to their heart.
Exactly, in that way. And I honestly feel like the characters like Rey and all that, and Finn, they should have been introduced either at the very second or third episode of the sequels, in terms of they should have been introduced later on, but they should have.
You're saying you want the originals to have their heyday and then kind of killed off.
I'm one of the people that waited 30 years, literally, probably even longer for that. Would hear rumors every year about it, like a rumbling and this and that. And then when the prequels happened, I was excited. And then I'm like, what about 6, 7, and 8? No, 8, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. And I was like, then there's hope. And then, once I realized that, then I saw the table reading. I was excited because I saw all of them together. Oh, yeah. And I'm just like, and I didn't.
It's weird because they like sprinkled pieces of them throughout the movies, and then they like didn't really know what to do, how front and center to put them, and then like how much development they wanted to give the new characters. But the new characters feel like archetypes of the old characters, and it's just so like jumbled for me.
The one basic rule is give the audience what they want. At least for the first movie, they didn't even Luke, Leia, and Han were never even together. Like that's something people waited for to see that, and that never will happen. Never will happen.
There's a lot to talk about there, and I think we will make that video soon before The Rise of Skywalker comes out. And I just wanted to like talk.
Even Mark's mad.
Yeah, I mean, clearly Mark Hamill's not happy with the story they've been telling. And
a great guy too.
In my opinion, the first 6 movies are just one of the greatest stories ever told. I know a lot of people say that, and I agree with that. That's probably, I think, my favorite story maybe ever. It's kind of the way they evolved that story. And like I said, these new movies don't feel like they have the same heart in them or the same passion. Because George Lucas clearly he cares about telling the story. Like he made it up, and it's kind of his baby in a lot of ways. And the fact that they took these ideas, and we don't even really know what they fully are, but kind of didn't even really regard them. And I know there was an interview too, like where they were talking, and again, I'm not exact on the details here, but they were with J.J. Abrams maybe, and it was Kathleen Kennedy. I think it was before The Force Awakens came out, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we saw the script and we just kind of discarded them," and they just kind of laughed, like it was like, "Haha," and I was like, "Wait, what?" Like they treated it like it was one of those things that you just say in passing and it goes away. Sort of how Bob Iger was like, "Oh yeah, George Lucas felt betrayed." Anyway, on to the next thing. And it was very like disconcerting for somebody to do that, about this guy who like you wouldn't even have this money that you made off of this movie without, you wouldn't even have this like IP without him. And it just, the way he's been treated for me is just like kind of unforgivable in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's just a lack of respect. I mean, it's almost, I would equate it to the point where, George Lucas is alive and well. Yeah. And there's no excuse for it.
He's not a senile old man.
He's not alien or anything like that. It's not like, well, we would love to have gotten him, but, obviously we can't.
He developed a lot of those stories and ideas like during the 80s and like post-original trilogy, before even he wrote the scripts for the prequels. And like a lot of those ideas, like he said, were just kind of sitting in his head, and he was waiting for technology to catch up. And for me, it's very annoying to kind of get this like disrespect to his stories because you might not like the prequels, but like I feel like a lot of people would agree with me that they have actually a very good story, just not necessarily executed perfectly. But the fact that almost none of his ideas were explored in the sequel trilogy, I feel like is weird. Because
I don't care if it was the weirdest story ever. It's like it was created, like Star Wars was created by him, so it should have ended with his story.
It's a lot like if J.R.R. Tolkien told the story about after the Black Gate was opened at Mount Doom and Sauron was defeated, and then like he was like, oh, here's my new story, like, and then they were just like, no, and he's like,
we're gonna go this direction.
and he's like, no, like this is what happens to Frodo, and he's like, no, it's not, like we're gonna do this, and he's like,
not anymore.
Okay. And it just felt like so weird, and like again, we'll talk about more of the details of the sequel trilogy later and our thoughts on it, but it just feels like, you know, maybe George Lucas did have some of these ideas and they're just, you know, not telling us, but I just don't think this is what George Lucas would have wanted. I really do think he had a clear vision and he had such a great, you know, kind of control over the characters and that he wrote and made up. Yeah. And it just seems like they've kind of done, you know, the opposite of what he wanted.
It's been a bunch of ignorance. And when I say ignorance, I mean when Mark Hamill tells you this is not what Luke would have done, and he's honestly lived with that character, and then for someone, a director or writer, to say no, he would, you know,
I mean,
like that takes a lot of confidence.
Mark Hamill's not Harrison Ford. He loves Luke Skywalker and he loves Star Wars. You know, no offense to Harrison Ford, like, 'cause he's great. He just doesn't like Star Wars like Mark Hamill does, and the fact that, like you said, like he was really advocating for his character, who he's been playing since literally like 4 decades ago, and just he's like, oh, you know, here's what I think would happen, and they kind of just tell him like, no, here's what's gonna happen. I really do think it's something that it seems like they didn't even like. It's bizarre to me in a sense. It's like it's very sacrilegious to like Star Wars, and I say sacrilegious because Star Wars is a religion to a lot of people, and you know, it's such like a widely thought of idea, you know, that a character should be a certain way, and then the movie comes along and just kind of tears that down and is like, oh, we're going to subvert your expectations, you know, which is a very controversial phrase now. And I kind of think like I don't even know what guided them to make these decisions, you know?
Honestly, I think that's part of the corporation and the machine. They probably looked up stats and said, we need this kind of character because this is underrepresented, or this is, if we put this character in, we'll get this audience. And it was paint by numbers in that way, but it lost its magic, it lost its soul. And I think that's the thing that, you know, like people like Mark and all that, they were fighting for the essence of Star Wars. Well, Disney really just wanted the brand Star Wars. Yeah,
that's a very good way to put it, because I feel like the original trilogy in a lot of ways pioneered Hollywood, pioneered storytelling. And, you know, like I said, like the prequels might not be accepted by everybody, but they're a way to kind of set up the story that was told decades before. And then this movie kind of comes along and is going to continue the story that was told decades before. But then it seems like it is making all the choices to actively like kind of reprimand that story, or sort of like fix it when the story never really needed fixing. And then it sets up things that you might like be excited about because it might kind of introduce new ideas, and then it kind of tears down all those things in its second movie, and then it kind of leaves you to ask like, what is going to happen in this third movie? And even besides that, just like what's going to happen with Star Wars, because now they're just trying to say like, in our new direction of Star Wars, we're trying to, you know, go into new avenues of storytelling, you know, episodic content and new individual character movies. And I just don't know if I necessarily buy it. Like you said, it is more touchy because it's the Skywalkers, which mean a lot to a lot of people. I know it means a lot to me, and it's kind of hurt me to watch it go this way. But it really just seems in general that their vision only is at its best when they let other people have the vision. And what I mean by that is that, like Jon Favreau, who's kind of the showrunner for Mandalorian, and you know, hopefully Obi-Wan turns out right because they get somebody competent and who loves Star Wars to do it. But every time somebody who's higher up has been in charge, or they leave somebody like, and I don't want to diss him because I know he's been dissed 1,000 times, but they leave somebody like Rian Johnson pretty much complete creative control over a story, then I just don't know how that's going to work out, you know? And it's really just kind of hurt me to see it go in this direction.
Yeah, I mean, this has been hard for me. I'm not gonna lie, just in terms of Star Wars, because I was bleeding Star Wars in my ears, and I was just like so that bright-eyed, like, oh my gosh, Star Wars is back, Star Wars is back, and now I'm just like, Star Wars is back, you know? And it's not. It's like it's not a good feeling.
Like I could wait another year to see this movie.
I honestly like maybe the trailer might be like, okay, maybe I should see it, but right now if they would have stopped, I would have been like on it. Like, well, that's the saddest thing.
Like I said, the most excited I got about when I saw the trailer and just heard about it was every time it's just John Williams. Yeah. Because at this point, that's all they have going for them, and that's a great thing going for you. But like when that's your only thing going for you, that just means you haven't made very good films or good stories. Because I think the thing about Star Wars that sets it apart in a lot of ways is that like I said, it's a lot of modern mythology. It's taken from so many, ancient storytelling, kind of cultures and kind of amalgamated into this brilliant new one. But it's a story first and a movie 2nd, which is why I always love Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's why I said, like, I give them some of the passes for some of the wonky dialogue because they're just great stories and great characters, which really is all that matters to me. But it feels like these new movies were just made by a bunch of people who just don't even really like Star Wars. And if they do like Star Wars, they don't have the competency as writers and filmmakers to make good Star Wars. And that has just kind of frustrated me.
Yeah, because you can judge it by, even with the prequels, it's like there was different like avenues. There was books, there was this and that. Yes. And I know they have books in as well, but it doesn't have the same attention.
I think one of the things about the prequels that made it cool is that the prequels, like, obviously get a lot more, like, love now. A, because of the sequel trilogy, and B, because of the Clone Wars, which, kind of bolstered a lot of things in the prequels and justified a lot of choices that a lot of people didn't agree with. But I never felt that I needed to watch the prequels and, like, read a book after to explain something. At least that's just because I know a lot of people disagree with that. But the sequels have been, like, putting out books explaining, like, how C-3PO got his, like, red arm or how Snow... And, like, those types of things, it sort of upsets me, and that's kind of a weird example, but more of a broader sense, like a Snoke type of character, that they need to explain that because they can't do it in the movie. Those type of things just sort of upset me, and it's been a little frustrating to watch, like, movies that, like I said, don't necessarily feel like they're coming from the same mindset that made the original Star Wars movies. They're not really trying to tell ancient mythology stories with brilliant new characters and whatnot. They're just trying to sort of make some money because they know how big the product and the brand of Star Wars is nowadays, and it will probably be for the next 100 years. And it's just sort of, like I said, it's very frustrating to be a part of something like a fan base that just is always at each other's throats because they can't agree on anything. But more of that feels betrayed by the people who are making the movies for them.
Yeah. Well, what would you say to someone that's with basically, because as you said, the fan base has they're at each other's throats as well because it's been divisive in terms of people that liked the Rian Johnson Last Jedi and people that hated it. But what would you say to someone that said, "Well, that's not, it didn't go the direction you wanted it to go, so that's why you're crying."
Well, okay, so I see that a lot, obviously, because I spend a lot of time on those videos, Star Wars, and there's a lot of things nowadays on the internet where you get a vocal minority too. But one of the things I would say is that, like, I get it, and if you like it, you're allowed to. Like, I've never met anybody who likes the sequels and, like, try to pick an argument with them because, like, what's wrong with you if you do that? People are allowed to like movies unless it's like, a really bad movie and they're, like, arguing with you that it's better than a movie you like. But I'm not talking about that. I'm saying if somebody likes The Last Jedi, like, more power to them because that's cool that you can find joy in that movie. And if you like all Star Wars movies, that's cool too. And I've seen a lot of people say, like, it's Star Wars, so I don't really care, And I appreciate that. And that's how I feel a little bit about the first two prequels. Like, I've put aside some of their flaws just because I love the story and the fact that it's Star Wars. But I really just can't say that with the new movies. And I even liked Force Awakens. I loved it when it first came out. The internet sort of ruined it for me, actually, because they were introducing all these ideas about, Rey, and then it kind of got political in a sense. And then it, talk about Kylo Ren, and people just at each other's throats. But once The Last Jedi came out, I really felt like a little heartbroken. And now at this point, I just feel like I don't even really have a desire to be, to invest my time into their story because I just feel like there's more interesting stories nowadays. And that should never be the case with Star Wars. Star Wars should be the most interesting thing out there, and it's just not even close to it.
When you said Rey, I just thought, it would have been so cool if, like, the three originals were, like, on a mission or something, and she was just like not a stowaway, but she was just not like kind of not as important. She was just someone that was helping out or something. Yeah. But then throughout the next couple movies, she became stronger and powerful. But it's like they just thrust her like, okay, we're going to weaken everyone else so that you can be stronger. But I don't want to keep...
Yeah, we don't need to beat a dead horse. But, like, it's just one of those things where it feels very disrespectful to me, the fact that... Because at the end of the day, like, you can say what you want, but, like, whoever you are on the internet insulting the prequels, the originals, or George Lucas's ideas, like, you're not George Lucas, and you didn't make Star Wars, so you really can't talk. That thing has made billions of dollars. It'll probably be at trillions one day, and it's going to be remembered for generations. It has been already remembered for generations, and it's something that has just felt, instead of this special thing, it feels like a novelty now. We just get a Star Wars movie every year, and I wouldn't even really complain about that if they were all good, but it's been pretty inconsistent.
I know what it is that bothers me. I was just thinking about it as you were talking. It's when you don't follow what a character would do
Yeah.
in terms of like that. And I have a lot of problems with Luke, obviously, because Mark Hamill did as well. But then I'm thinking about everything in that way, and it's kind of like that's why I had a problem with the new Superman.
Yeah.
Because when he kills Zod, like I was just like that bothered me because it was something traditionally that Superman would not do, And I know a lot of people love that. It's like, ooh, edgy Superman. But for me, like I'm very traditional in terms of I just want my characters to be like they are, like they normally have been for 50,
I think
60
you're coming
years.
from a different mindset too, which is because a lot of people would really, go at you for that, like characters need to evolve, and I'm kind of in the
For a
middle of
reason.
that, because I do think certain characters should be changed. But I think change is good. Like a character arc is obviously one of the most important things. Luke did change from A New Hope, but when you're talking about a character that feels like you fundamentally changed him and don't give enough story to justify it, like you're taking these monumental icons, of popular culture and cinema, and like just changing them into something. It seems like to fulfill your agenda of shocking people instead of like telling a good story, and that for me is sort of unforgivable. So,
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and like I just want to reinforce one time, like it really does suck. I'm assuming for George Lucas to create such great characters and kind of see, because at the end of the day, it's his right to do what he wants with those characters. So if episodes 7 through 9 were just, I don't know, like movies where people sat in the room and like ate food for 2 hours, it's kind of his choice,
Yeah.
And
I would have respected that choice.
I would have respected that choice because it's his choice. And obviously that's a bit hyperbolic, but that's just to get my point across that it's what he chooses to do with the story. And you can even disagree. Like there's certain choices that George Lucas made that I don't necessarily agree with. But the fact that people are showing this disrespect and saying, my least favorite phrase on the internet ever is he ruined Star Wars. You can't ruin what you create. Like I don't even know what to say to that.
No, well, it's the J.K. Rowling's Fantastic Beast. It's her universe. Like, don't tell me these people are like maybe you didn't like the newer movies as much as the Harry Potter franchise, but don't pretend you know more than she knows. It's her universe. She created these characters. If she wants to make someone this way or that way, it's her freedom to do that because it's her characters. You can make another series or another universe if you want, but it's like it takes a lot of audacity.
Well, that's why fan fiction was invented.
Yeah.
Like, you could just, there's plenty of people who make fake Star. I used to do it when I was younger. I used to like rate Star Wars stories I just thought were cool. Like, you're allowed to do that. But when it seems like fan fiction got made into a major motion picture with like a $200 million budget, put in theaters and called Star Wars Episode 8 in the most epic saga of all time, I don't even know what to say to that. And like,
I saw a frame or like about 10 seconds of the ending with the kid with the broom, and honestly, it made me mad again. Yeah. Like it triggered and so I don't know if I can watch it again.
It's so funny too because like people, I remember like I think a lot of people forgot that Colin Trevorrow was supposed to direct the third one or the ninth one, and J.J. Abrams got brought back because they were like, all right, well, the story's already kind of spiraling down. We're already crash landing. We just want you to do it as smoothly as possible, because that's just the best we can do at this point, and. So J.J. Abrams got to get his Anakin on and practice the crash landing, and hopefully he does a good job. And I really hate to rag on J.J. because I think he's a Star Wars fan at heart.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with every choice he made, but he seems like a genuinely good guy and a Star Wars fan. And I don't know. I don't think Rian Johnson's a bad person. I hope that doesn't come across. He's
no, I don't. I just.
But it's just like. I don't know, just in general, Star Wars just felt like it's something else. And it really, at this point, like a lot of people have said, feels like a little bit of fan fiction. And I don't know. I think that's kind of all I have to say on that.
Yeah, I have a pet peeve for people that, want to make their mark on something so they change or do something drastic to make their mark on it.
Yeah.
I just, that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. They do it in comics sometimes, where they'll kill a main character or kill someone just so that like their storyline has power to it and like people pay attention to me. And
I
just
think
don't like it.
George Lucas walked in on the prequels with the noblest and best of intentions. It was to tell a story he wanted to tell. He probably wanted to tell it since like the 70s, but he just, like you said, didn't have the technology, and it was something that he really felt like it was something that he should do. And like you're saying, like he didn't do choices to give himself more merit or credibility or make controversial choices. He made the choices that he felt was best for his story. And I'm not inside anybody's head who have written any of these new Star Wars movies. I just don't know if I agree or think that's what they have done. And it's just at the end of the day, like I love the 6 movies. I adore the Clone Wars, and I really just think that it's not working. I personally just don't think Kathleen Kennedy should be a part of it.
Real quick, I just want to make sure people know too. It's not like the acting. It's not that the actors are good actors and stuff like that. Like we're not ragging on. It's more of the story aspect of it and the respect to the characters. Like, like I don't think Finn was developed. Like honestly, like that's the problem. And then Poe's relationship with Finn in terms of they started as like, they're gonna be like a team or camaraderie, and then it's like they're separated for the whole other movie. It's like. And it's just so I just feel there's no character.
At the end of the day, like if you like the sequel trilogy, like I hope you didn't click on this video expecting anything but negativity, because this is a negative video. I'll admit it.
If they know us by now, I think they.
I'm a big Star Wars fan. I have nothing but love for the original story.
So you're not a hater.
I'm not a hater.
I'm not a hater either.
Because if I was a hater, I'd say that they were complete garbage and hate on every word and use these powerful adjectives to describe just how awful they are and say they ruined my childhood, which in some ways they have. But I'm not saying that like you're allowed to like these movies and they're not objectively awful films. The one other thing I would say is that I heard somebody say the other day that objectively you're wrong because the prequels are like horribly made. At least the sequels are competently made films. Like the prequels have pretty good CGI for the 2000s, and most of the script makes sense. And I don't know. I'm
a story over how it's made any day. Like I care about the story. I care about the stories and the characters, and that's always what I've cared about with Star Wars was the story and the characters.
And at the end of the day, like love your Star Wars. You're allowed to. You should. Like I wish I could. It's not like I want to hate these movies. Like I actually, like I said, love The Force Awakens. Maybe it's the internet has just hardened me and turned me into just a cynic, but I don't think so. I think it's some other stuff. But,
I loved Rey in the beginning until I realized that Luke was weakened to make Rey stronger. That bothered me. And it's not her fault, as a character or whatever. But it's like I don't know.
Yeah,
I can go on too many.
Yeah. There's probably I don't know how we would suggest what you comment. Just if you want to talk about your opinions on these Star Wars movies. If you read about the story,
are you excited about? Are you
excited? Do you like the old Star Wars movies? If you don't care about Star Wars,
did you like The Last Jedi? Be brave and let us know.
Yeah, and just
why you liked it.
Yeah, and that's kind of all I have to say. If you have any hot takes or regular takes, if you want to show your love for George Lucas, he deserves it. And that's all I kind of have to say about that.
Same here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. As we said, leave a comment down below in terms of what you thought about this episode and what you think about the Star Wars situation. And we'll catch you next week.